Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for your patience in the waiting room. We are really excited to have our first talkback of our winter series. And this talkback is focusing on two films, two Dani Menkin films. Is That You, which is for us a throwback, a wonderful throwback to 2015, and Alcy. This is Dani's fourth or fifth appearance on our stage, but the first time virtually. So we're really excited to welcome him back. And in addition, we have Eisen, who is the executive producer for these films and has worked closely with Dani for the past 7 years to be in conversation with Dani and with us. And Morton Meyerson, who many of us in Dallas are familiar with as a patron of the arts and someone who feels a personal connection to these films. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our guests, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. My name is Eisen, and I'm going to help moderate the panel tonight. I want you to know that Dani and I have had the pleasure of having panels like this for about 50 times before. So if it looks very natural how we ask questions and answer them, I want you to know you're not imagining stuff. However, tonight we have the utmost pleasure of having a dear friend, a personal mentor, and a patron of the arts, the Morton Meyerson, with us, which, as you'll see, is just connected to our lives in so many different ways, and of course to Israel. What I would like to do in the next hour is give you what you probably expect, which is answer some basic questions about the movies, about the story in them, and what happens to the heroes in them. And I also want to give you some answers about the frequently asked questions we usually get, and you might not feel comfortable asking, which is, how do you make a movie, and what does an executive producer do, and how long does it take, and how do you get it all started? Because many of you might be artists in your own mind, and you want to do something like this, and this would be a great opportunity just to ask, well, how do I get started? So to get us going, our bios are on the page if you want to look at them later on for all three of us. I'll start with a question to Dani to get us started about the movie Alcy. As you know, Alcy is a story about a legend, a fairy who came to Israel and became a basketball player. But the movie itself was really not only about his life, but also about his life in Israel and how he was accepted there. And of course, a road trip to find his daughter. I'd like to ask you, Dani, why did you choose to tell this story about Alcy Perry?
Mm-hmm. First, thank you so much. I'm honored, being with you, Ori, and what I like to call Mordechai, because he emailed me once with that Hebrew name, Morton Meyerson from Dallas. And later on, we'll even tell this incredible story of the connection to the stories that we're showing now, which is a beautiful story that I love to share. But for me, Alcy Perry was really my childhood hero. I was always curious to know what really happened to him on those years that he disappeared. And when we talk about somebody like him disappearing, we're talking about somebody that really represented the country. Now, if you follow some of my films, 39 Pounds of Love and Dolphin Boy and Picture of His Life, or even On the Map, for sure, Is That You? I love to have a love story. And what really drawn me into this film was the love story between him and Tammy. So I wrote this as a feature film, as a narrative movie, as a script. And I was chasing after Alcy for more than 20 years until one time he was in the hospital and he could not run away from me because I went to visit him. And I told Alcy, you must share this story. And he said, you know what, this is time for me to share it. And he is mentioning for the first time that he has a daughter that he hasn't seen for almost 20 years, and he want to reach out to her, and he wants her to learn about his life from the movie or from himself. He want to be in control to what she knows. He didn't want her to look him up in Wikipedia or in Google and learn about all the rumors that were around whatever happened to him. So that's where he said, Dani, I'm ready to tell that story. And the documentarian in me said, great, I'm going to learn more about him for the narrative film that I want to make by going with him, looking for his daughter, and he's going to tell the story that happened to him, the unbelievable story. He's going to tell it to his daughter, but that way he's really going to tell it to us. So that was the one thing that excited me so much, because it was not only a story that goes backward, it was a story that we could follow from present to the future. And that's, for me, makes it a movie, not like On the Map, which was really an historian film. On the Map, another film that Ori and I worked on together with our team, was an exciting love story between a team and a country. But it was really going to the past. So I really knew that Ossie Perry is the story I want to bring to the world.
Thank you, Dani. Mr. Meyerson, the question for you is, you have seen a lot of movies in your life. You have visited Israel more than once. And there's something in Dani's movies that made you connect to them in a way that is probably special, because I still remember the first time you and I talked about these movies and how he approaches the story and how he grabs you into it. Could you share in your own words, when you saw this movie with your personal connections to Israel, what did it make you feel? What did you think about? Why do you think these kind of stories are helping to tell the story nobody hears about Israel in the newspapers, for example?
All right, so about Alsi.
Yes.
Okay. Well, it was the third movie that I had seen that Dani had done. And I found it to be, it wasn't so much a story about, to me, it wasn't so much a story about Alsi, the basketball star, but about the human condition and the part of Israel that to me is very attractive, which is brutal, face-to-face, no BS insight into things. That's when I'm in, I was raised in Fort Worth, Texas, in the South in the United States. And there's a dance that people do in Fort Worth to be nice and civil. And I'm not saying Israelis are not civil. I'm just saying that in Israel, I found people to be very direct and frontal in what they were thinking and feeling. And so I watched the story on multiple levels. One of them was, here's a famous star, basketball star, but he's a celebrity and he has a fall. And how does he deal with that? And he deals with meeting with his daughter and how the country dealt with a person of color who was a basketball star and how Israelis are. And so I was watching it on so many levels that I found it to be really quite interesting. And I at the end of the movie, I was thinking, Alsi is a person that I wish I personally knew and that I could relate to. And I don't do that very often with the stars in movies, but now this is like a documentary, so it's different than a movie. A picture of his life was and Dolphin Boy were quite different stories. But here you had a human being with the frailties and the strengths and the towering size and the celebrity nature of the star. And then you saw the real person. And in my life, I never expected to be an executive. I always thought I would be just a worker. I never expected to have any fame or position. All of this surprised me. And so I could relate to this situation. Ossie was a star, but he wasn't a star. He was human, but he is a human with frailties. He was a natural athlete and unbelievably powerful, and yet he wasn't. And Israel was shown in the same way. Israel is a huge success in a country and has its own frailties. And so to me, I felt that it had a 360-degree feel to it, all elements of what life is. And since I'm 82, I'm sensitive to those things. And that's why I like the movie.
Fantastic. Dani, when you decided you wanted to make this movie, the road is long. You need financing, you need editors, you need to get the rights, you need to follow Olsey to find his daughter. All these things need to happen, and as a director, it's all falling on your shoulders. Could you share with the audience, what were you thinking if you were not to meet the daughter? Let's say that the mom would say, I don't want you to meet her. What would you have done then with the movie? Mm-hmm. So people get a sense that documentaries are not scripted. I mean, you have to create them as you go and be honest enough to say, I might not get the shot that I'm really hoping for. Yeah. So how do you think about those things?
I mean, if to be more even accurate about the process of working is that documentaries actually, in my view, are very much scripted, but you are sharing the screenplay that you have in mind with God. Now, if God's documentary is with you, like happened with Picture of His Life, Dolphin Boy, 39 Pounds of Love, and Olsey, you have the happy ending that you wish for. But very much in the process of making the film, specifically with Olsey, I had another option of not finding the daughter, and then the movie will rely more on the love story between him and Tammy, and maybe on the balance between the bittersweetness of that story and her dying and him magically just finding a way to meet with her just before she goes and she passed away, really miraculously. Is going out of jail, out of prison, out of parole, never heard of, to a TV show, but really saying goodbye to the love of his life. And that probably would have much bigger weight on the story than the overall thing. Now, I really am happy that I was managing to have the frame. And to your question, I was already in the editing room when I got the call from Olsey, and guess what? She reached out to me. Olsey is a very gentle guy. So when he reached out to the mother and she told him, not yet, I don't want him to see your daughter yet, we had to, put aside the idea of that ending. But then she called and we were able to have that incredible ending. We flew to North Carolina. Now, to your question of how do we make it happen is really, we're telling good positive stories from Israel. So as you well know, we have a non-for-profit foundation, which we call On the Map Foundation, based on the map. And we are relying on help and support and donations from the community, because those films usually they don't sell to big platforms. I mean, we're taking them as far as we can with the distribution, but they are really getting to the heart of many, many folks and communities. And what is striking me about what we've done with On the Map and with OC is that it's also getting to a young generation. So anyone who hears us in Texas, we're going to share with you guys the link if anyone wants to support. And if you see that ball that Ori has behind him, that's because because Ori was supporting us with the OC. And guess what? We have another ball that is actually signed by OC Perry, Tal Brody, Nancy Spielberg, and myself. It's an official Maccabi Tel Aviv basketball. So that's for whoever will support us to continue making inspiring films. But I will say it's not only the financial side that is absolutely part of making a film. It's carrying the story and making sure you are able to entertain people and bring them the inspiration that you had in making this film. So that's part of it. And as you know, Ori, you were there with me in the process, and you sometimes told me, you know what, it's a fascinating story. I'm here with you, but it's not there yet. We need to dig a little bit deeper, and you need to sometimes dig a little bit deeper, and that takes time, energy, and money, like everything in life. And I'm very happy because the reaction from folks and from audiences are incredible. But that ties almost like the two stories together. Is that you and also because I remember when you called me and you say, you will not believe what happened now, and you can continue that story.
Yes. I'm going to get to that story of how Mort saw your movie, not knowing that you and I know each other soon. I promise we'll leave that to the end.
Okay.
We're starting to get some audience questions. So why don't we ask one more question to Mort, and then we'll open it up so you guys feel like you have a dialogue. My question to you, Mort, is this. As you said, you grew up in Dallas, and I don't know that the
Fort Worth.
Yeah, let's be exact.
Yeah, the very big difference.
Big difference. I assume that JCC did not exist when you were a kid. Is that correct?
There was no JCC in Fort Worth until I was an adult.
Okay. My question to you is this. If you go back in time and you think of yourself as a Jewish kid growing up without the JCC, do you think showing movies like Olsi would help Jewish American kids feel more connected to Israel, experience the thing that is probably harder to experience if you only live in the US? Do you think there's value there?
I'm having trouble relating to my early days in Fort Worth, but I can deal with the question as you ask it, which is more contemporaneous. The answer is yes. There's at least three medium that people listen to: this digital, the internet, all that stuff, written, which some people still do old-fashioned, and video film. I've spent my life pre-internet and post-internet dealing with images, communication, branding, etc., having to do with technology. The most powerful form is movies, video, because you have a story and you got images and you got music. And you combine those things and you can communicate with people. The second most powerful are still images with the story, and the least powerful is just the story because people have trouble concentrating, maybe listening to podcasts. I think that movies about Israel that come from a non-propaganda place is very important. One of my objections to movies that I see from Israel is, in 5 minutes, I can tell you if they're coming from a phony place. We want to make the case that Israel is an apartheid country and I'm a extreme left person and I want to take that position, or vice versa. I'm a settler and I'm going to be on the right, and we're going to Judea and Samaria, we're going to free it. And so they have all kinds of political stuff going on. Movies that do that, I think, make a mistake because they're so obvious. And honesty and storytelling goes along. Of course, storytelling and humans go back hundreds of thousands of years. And that's what's powerful about movies of Israel. If they just come down the middle without an agenda, and I felt Aussie did that. I really felt that Dani wasn't manipulating me to like him or not like him, and neither was Aussie manipulating me. It was a story, but it wasn't a one-dimensional story. It was a story about him. It's a story about relationships. It's a story about loss. It's a story about finding. It's a story about being in Israel. It's a story about a country. It's a story about crowds. All these things are very, very, very important. So the short answer, this is a long answer I'm giving you, but the short answer to your question is, if movies, particularly documentaries and stories that come down through the middle without an agenda, is the most powerful way to communicate with people, and then let people make up their own mind. They either like what they see or they don't, because you can't manipulate people in the final analysis. You can for a short period of time, but long term, it doesn't work.
Awesome. Let's do this. We'll start taking your questions. We have the first one, and if we don't have hands raised, we have some pre-canned questions. But let's start with what we're getting. Dani, Barbara is asking, did Olsi always know he had a daughter, or he only found out after he left prison?
So Olsi definitely knew he had a daughter, and he was in touch with her when he was on parole in North Carolina. We did not know. I mean, I, as somebody who really researched his life, not only me, it was also his friends. I mean, I have a scene that didn't end up in the final cut that he tells that to Tal Brody. And Tal Brody said, really? And they are such good friends. So Olsi did not share that with him. And part of what I was trying to show in the film, and as Morton mentioned, you know, I did not try to, I had no agenda in my film besides the love to Olsi and the story. But part of what came through the film, and I found out about it more and more in the editing room, is that it's not only a love story, not only a family story, it's also of Olsi finding the community and realizing he has a family and making a full redemption at the end of the day and that's part of what Israel influenced him. Whoever has been in Israel, whoever knows our country, family is the number one priority of our community. So Olsi then realized that when he came to Israel, he neglected his son. And part of the redemption was, now when I'm almost 70 years old, I want to correct that and I want to reach out to my daughter. It's not late yet. I'm still here. And I want to tell her everything that happened so she can understand why I was not present in her life. I cannot correct it. I cannot fix it, but I can do something now that will make it better from this moment on.
We have the next question. As a person who grew up in Israel, I think I know the answer, but Dani, you're so close to Shamluk that I think you're the best person to answer it. Olsi's coach at one point said that he was so angry with him that he wanted to kill him, quote unquote. I was surprised but pleased that love prevailed when they met and not anger. And I was surprised at this. Do you have any insight into why the coach said that? And what is their real emotion when they said, I want to kill you?
So I'm very happy about the question because, as I mentioned, one of the dimensions of this film is the family. And when Ossi came to Israel, he suddenly found a family, and he was recruited by Shamluk. He wasn't the coach, he was actually the manager of the team. And Shamluk was kind of like his father figure. Yeah, now you need to understand, and that's why I think also Ori knows the answer. In Israel, when a father figure will say, I wanted to kill him, that's almost the best way to describe love. Now, I do get that question a lot here in the United States, not in Israel. But for me, the way Shamluk said it, when he said, I was so angry at him, I wanted to kill him, for me, it was translated as, I love him so much. How could he do that to me? And then towards the end, of course, we could see what Olsi meant to Shamluk and what Shamluk meant to Olsi. What I will also share with you guys, there were two people that I spoke to just before the movie was released, and I shared with them the film. One of them is David Stern, the belated commissioner of the NBA that I had the honor to meet thanks to Ori Eisen that was also in touch with him, and he was part of our movie On the Map. And David Stern was very moved by Olsi. I spoke to him just a little bit before he passed away, and I'm very honored that he saw the film and reacted to it so well. And the second person that I showed the film just before it was released was Shamluk. He was in a very advanced case of dementia. And a month before he passed away, I came to his home in Tel Aviv. I think I even shared with you already that video that he was not speaking through the whole time, through the whole visit, besides those words that he said. And they were, I would not go without seeing this film. That's it. That's the only thing he had said. So that was very moving, and I don't know, there is so much magic in the air. I like to quote Ori that sometimes said, what will be the odds? And I feel like sometimes, life is really like a miracle. And I don't know, I mean, I more and more feel like that lately. So I'm been seeing Ori, Morton, Meyerson here, and talking about this story makes me connect all the dots. When you're going through a big journey, and I think everybody is going through something now, you don't see the dots, you just see the hurdle, you just see the journey, you just see the obstacles. And then suddenly you do see, when you zoom out a little bit and you do see. And now talking about it with you guys, it's like, it's just like we say in Israel, we do not believe in miracle, but we depend on them.
Awesome. We have another question, Dani, for you. How do you source your stories? How do you decide which stories to tell as a director?
For me, if I see a beginning, middle, and end, and I'm started to be excited, I know I'm going to jump for the film. I remember when I met with my partner for Dolphin Boy, Jonathan, and that was after 39 Pounds of Love. The only thing that I cared about is that there will be dolphins. The only thing I cared about also is that there will be this story in basketball, because the journey is so hard. So I said, I don't know if there will be money here, if they will be something that, will be successful. You don't know. Every movie is like a small startup. I know one thing, there is something that I love in this journey that I want to go through. So I told Jonathan, I remember when we did Dolphin Boy, I said, we will be paid by dolphins. Same for On the Map. You have to make a film from love. And I remember, Ori, you once told me, I'll be with you as long as your heart is there, and that's, the one thing that I take with me when I decide to make a film is like, is my heart beating when I'm going to start doing it? You know, it's interesting. You know, this morning I met with one of my musicians for the movie 39 Pounds of Love. I'm sorry, I didn't meet with, I want to say I met with him, but I didn't meet with him. I met with his wife. He passed away a few months ago. And he worked with Chris Gubish, and Chris Gubish made the music for Halsey. And we were speaking with his wife for a few hours, and we told her we have a new movie. We loved his music. We want part of his music with us. He wrote the song, if you remember, Ori, Kiss Me Goodnight, Don't Kiss Me. Kiss Me and Good Night, Don't Kiss Me Goodbye. And that's like was the engine of 39 Pounds of Love. And I just felt that, you know, he's with us. So when you're making a film, you have a way to touch something that will stay with us even when you are not going to be in the world. So that's kind of like what drives me to do that. I remember Alex Giladi once told, we were like in a seminar for young filmmakers, reporters in Israel, and he was yelling at us, saying, guys, you don't understand. You are touching the infinite. You are touching something that will be here long after you'll be gone. So that's what is exciting for me, because Halsey's story will be with us. And that's what drives me. It's a long answer for a short question. Sorry.
How about we'll take one more questions and then we'll start wrapping if we don't get any others. The question is, how are Israelis of Halsey's story? Is it the generational story, or the people who live now also know who he is and what he did?
It's different when I show the film in Israel because everybody knows who Halsey Perry is. Same like we had with On the Map. Everybody knows On the Map is like the 11th commandment in Israel. But nobody knew about it here. So part of what I was trying to bring is a good, positive story that inspired our country, and check to see if it will inspire people right here in the United States. So people react to it different, but some people are looking into the redemption story, the family story, the love story, the biracial love story. Some people are talking about the addiction story because it's a big thing here in the United States. So there are so many layers to this film. That's why I knew, I don't know if I even told you that ever, Ori, but you know, you mentioned at the beginning, like Morton Meyerson being kind of like a mentor for you. In 1999, that's where I came to the United States to learn about working with actors. And my instructor there, teacher, was Ellen Meyerson. Ellen Meyerson became my mentor. And he's the age of Morton Meyerson. So Ori and I are the same age, same generation, and I think we both are sharing Meyerson mentors. And I mentioned this film because on 1999, I was sitting with him in Venice. I was amazed that he's sitting with me. He was doing Police Academy, Ally McBeal, Friends. He was like a big director. He was going to the studios and stuff, and he was sitting with me. I could not understand it. The only thing we had in common is that we both like hummus, just like we have in common, Ori. Maybe more than you too. But he was sitting with me, and he told me, Dani, what is the story that you wanted to bring to the world? More than 22 years ago. And I was telling him the whole story of Halsey. I didn't know anything about the daughter, but I told him the whole story about the Halsey and about him coming to Israel, surprising everyone on TV and meeting the love of his life, Tammy, just before she's dying from cancer. And Ellen tells me, that's your movie. So that's why it's so moving for me to see me now with 2 kids in LA and talking about it. And that's my new movie. Thanks to all of you guys, of course.
All right. Mort, if you don't mind, I'll ask you one more question and then we'll wrap with two quick questions. In the beginning of this chat, Dani was alluding to the fact that I somehow connected the two of you. That is true. I remember reading an email from you about this movie you just picked up on Amazon called Is That You? And you usually, watch a lot of movies, but they're meh. But this one really was speaking to you. And I said, you know what, Mort, I actually know the guy who made this movie. Why don't I connect you guys and you can chat? Could you share your experience first as a viewer? Why did you like this movie so much? And perhaps give this audience a little bit of a glimpse of what was it like talking to Dani after watching the movie and exchanging notes.
All right. Well, I'll take a general picture about why I liked Dani's movies and what it was like talking with him. To begin with, I rarely talk to directors or impresarios. I've talked to a lot of people that fund movies, but I've not really been on the professional side. I don't know people like that. So when we stumbled into the fact that you knew Dani and had produced movies with him and that I had seen one of his movies and liked him, I thought, this is like life. It's coincidental. Things happen. A lot of people think they're accidental. My feeling is they may be accidental and they may be providential. I don't know what it is. But my conversation with Dani was very interesting to me because I've seen a lot of Israeli movies. And the ones that I saw that Dani did had an authenticity and a directness that I appreciated. And I didn't feel like I was being manipulated. And then when I talked to him, I felt the same thing. And I could go on and on about this, which I won't, but I do want to say one thing about Judaism, movies, and Israel, if that's not too heavy for you.
Please.
My access to Judaism is through text or text study. I'm much more interested in that and more connected than I am through ritual. And I discovered this in 1996, and I won't go into how, but I did. And I've been studying Torah since 1996 in Israel, in the US, and consistently. And a lot of people, even Jewish people, have said to me, I don't understand why a boy from Fort Worth, who was a football player and a cowboy kind of person relates to this ancient writing. And I'm going to summarize why, and then I'm going to relate it to Dani and the movies. The reason why I study Torah is because it's an unvarnished story of life. I love Torah because it doesn't put out a fabrication BS story about all these wonderful patriarchs and how they were perfect. They were not perfect. As a matter of fact, they were materially imperfect. Now, that's the way life is. Families are imperfect. Relationships are imperfect. People make mistakes, and there's all kinds of things. If you read Torah, and I read the same thing every year and have since 1996, it's right there in front of you. And that's what I like about it, because I see different aspects, because each year I'm different, but the Torah is the same. And it's like going through a stream where you can't go through the same river twice because the water changes, the weather, etc. So that's why I like Torah. Now, what's that got to do with, what's that got to do with movies? It's got everything to do with movies. And that's why Dani's movies impress me, because Dani put it out, to put the stories out with its imperfections, with its strangeness, with the twist, etc. Now, of course, he was writing a story and had music and so on and so forth, and it had to hold together. But I liked Aussie because he was real. I liked the movie because it was real. I like pictures of his life because I'm old enough to relate to an older man in a relationship or not into a relationship. I like Dolphin Boy because of the obsessions that I saw. And that's the power of movies coming from Israel about Israeli life and things that happen there. It's real and it's put out before you, and it's like a buffet. And if you want to partake of it, you do. And if you don't, you don't.
Love it. Let's do one more question and then we'll begin to wrap.
Yeah, before even the one question, you know, I want to say that, you know, it was also very interesting and moving for me when I got the call from Ori. I think it was like Friday night, and Ori comes like, look at this, what will be the odds? And then when he got like the email from Morton, because Morton didn't know that Is That You is our film. I shared with you guys our film Is That You on Amazon Prime, and but was also very moving to me was later when I spoke to Morton, and he was very kind to analyze the film. You know, I understood why it was relating to his life personally. That's when I told him, you know what, then I want you to see also, because there are other layers. Morton, I don't know if you're comfortable sharing. I know tomorrow you mentioned it's the yard side for Marilyn, for your wife, but I would love for you, if you're comfortable, to tell that story, because that's was something that put all the dots for me of why I'm making films. That how come sometimes somebody will write a story and it will touch someone from Fort Worth, Dallas as a syringe, and he will write this email to Ori that happened to me to be my executive producer. And so,
you mean when I wrote about pictures of his life?
About Is That You? When you wrote about Is That You, and how it was, it reminded you of your story, your personal story.
All right. Well, I think that's the story. The story is that when people read books, when they see videos, when they see movies, they can either get into it and see facets of their life, and they can witness someone else going through troubles or whatever they're going through. And it gives you a perspective so you can simultaneously relate to the story, because part of that or a lot of that has happened to you. And at the same time, you're watching the movie with music and so on and so forth. And that's the connection. And that was the connection that I had. But it's really not just that movie. I had the same reaction. Picture of His Life was something, the dolphin story, Dolphin Boy, all the stories touch me on a personal basis, because there were facets of those stories that I understood because I had lived it. And I think that's what the power of movies are, that if you can touch humans at where they live, that really means something. I think Dani's movies have been great for me. And on top of that, they come from Israel, which is the messaging from Israel with reality is a very important facet of things. And in today's political climate is 100 times more important today than when I saw the movies.
Wow, I feel lucky myself just being here and chatting with the two of you. This is so cool. Let's end with one last question, and then I'll hand it back to the organizers. Dani, what is your next film about?
So my next film, I feel very lucky that I was able to shoot a film during this craziness and nobody got sick. My next film is Little Town. It's a family story, another road trip film of a father taking his son that thinks that his belated mother, his mother that passed away, will be somewhere in the mountain. So it's really is like a journey, bittersweet journey. And when the father is a stand-up comedian that is going to an open mic because he thinks that will be his big break, and they're all going to their kind of like impossible dream. And like any road trip, you know, it's not about the goal, it's about the journey and what happens to them on the way. I had incredible actors and an unbelievable crew, and just the fact that I was able to make a film, or at least to cross the shooting of the film in November, just before, and again, God's movies, the stars were with us, because at the day that we had our wrap party for the film, very careful wrap party, but the day that we wrapped, that's when the governor here decided that he's issuing a stay-at-home order. So we could not time it better than this. So this is our next film, and I hope we will be able to come back here to Dallas with it, and this time bring the entire family, because it's a film for anyone. I mean, it's a little bit of a story about father and son, and as a young father, you know, I was inspired to write it, and I enjoyed very much doing it.
Wonderful. Rochelle, I'm going to hand it back to you to wrap, and thank everybody for joining us tonight.
Okay, thank you. So has been fantastic. You know, we've had Dani. We had the pleasure of Dani speaking after several films. Always a treat, but this is a triple treat. Thank you very much for a really, really interesting conversation. And the last question was my question, what's next, which is what I always ask Dani when I see him. Sometimes I get to see a little bit of a film on an iPhone, not today, obviously, but we do hope to see you and your next movie live. And it would be amazing if we could have the three of you again on our stage, virtual or live. This has been wonderful. We really appreciate the time you've given us. And if you'd like to join us for the rest of our series, we've got several movies coming up in the next couple of weeks. And I mentioned in the chat to Ori that one of the movies is called Mrs. G, and it is about the impresario of the Gotex swimsuit line, which a lot of us in America know. But what I didn't know who was behind it, and I didn't know the muse for the model for those swimsuits was Tammy, the very same Tammy who appears in Alcy, the love of his life, and the muse for Mrs. G. So that film is coming up in a few weeks, and we hope to see you all for that. Thank you very much, and have a great evening. We really appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everybody. See you next time in Dallas.